Welcome. I'm Gwen Diglis, Deputy Director for the American Cinematheque, and I'd like to invite you to visit our website, americancinematheque.com, where you can find information about our program and how you can support the American Cinematheque by becoming a member and making a donation. I would like to thank Netflix for this conversation with screenwriter, director Aaron Sorkin and actor Rob Lowe. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Aaron.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm so good. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad everybody's joining us. This is very exciting for me to talk to my great friend and collaborator, Aaron Sorkin, director, writer, king of Hollywood. It's true. It's all true.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm happy to be here.
Aaron, I loved the movie. I think everybody loves the movie. We're going to get to that in detail. But I think that a lot of people don't really know how you started. And I love the notion of how you wrote A Few Good Men, because I think it's a great learning for people who may be in jobs that they don't want to be in, that feel like they have a calling and want to break in, and you did it. How did you do it?
Well, I studied theater in college, and I came to New York, and I did what every struggling writer, actor, director, artist does in New York. You take as many survival jobs as you can, anything that'll pay minimum wage. I bussed tables. I dressed up as a moose in Times Square and handed out leaflets. I worked at the TKTS booth, but mostly my main source of income was I was a bartender at Broadway theaters. And when you do that, you're not working during the first act. You're working during the walk-in, the half hour before curtain. You're working at intermission. But until you have to start setting up for intermission, you've got the first act off. And so I wrote A Few Good Men on cocktail napkins during the first act of La Cage aux Folles.
Thank you for coming and our conversation.
Here's the important thing. Yeah. When I was doing that, I didn't imagine anything that happened. That wasn't what I was dreaming of. I wanted to be a professional writer, which, and by that I mean my dream was to be able to pay my bills with money I made writing. Pay my rent on a one-bedroom apartment, be able to afford pizza, be able to afford to pay a phone bill. And that's not a modest goal, you know, that's hard to do. So everything that happened, a lot of it was lightning striking. I mean, even the way the play got produced, I had, in the middle of writing A Few Good Men, I spent 4 days writing a one-act play because I thought I'd get my foot in the door. But New York has one-act play festivals. By the way, it didn't occur to me to come to Los Angeles, where they're hard to get, but there are entry-level jobs in the writing business. You can be a writer's assistant on a TV show. You can write a spec script. You can get a writing sample out there. It's a slightly more welcoming environment for writers than New York, slightly more. And as much as I loved movies and TV shows, for some reason, it just never occurred to me that those are written by people too. I was only thinking about writing plays. So to get my foot in the door, I took 4 days off from writing A Few Good Men, wrote a one-act play, and it got accepted to a festival. And that's how I got an agent. And he asked me, did I have anything else? And I showed him whatever draft I was on of A Few Good Men. I'm sure I wrote 100 of them. He read it and he said, this is good. We're going to send it to our West Coast office, and we think we can get you staffed up on a TV show, which I should have popped an entire case of champagne when he said that. But instead I said, well, that sounds good, but what about doing the play? And he said, come on, it's way too big a play to do anywhere but on Broadway. Nobody's going to do a Broadway play by a 26-year-old playwright nobody's ever heard of. Nobody's doing new plays anymore. And that night, my agent was at Tony and Tina's wedding, a performance of Tony and Tina's wedding, which if for anybody who doesn't know Tony and Tina's Wedding, it's interactive with the audience. You and I could be having this conversation at Tony and Tina's Wedding at the show. And he was standing next to the development director of a legendary movie producer who died a few years ago named David Brown. The Sting, The Verdict, Tora, Jaws. And the development director said, you know, David just had a great time doing The Verdict. And he's really looking for another courtroom drama. Do you know of anything? and that's how it happened. And David Brown teamed up with an equally legendary Broadway producer named Robert Whitehead. Robert Whitehead produced the Broadway debuts of Tennessee Williams, William Inge, Arthur Miller, and in a stunning anticlimax, me. And so A Few Good Men got done on Broadway, and then I was brought out here to adapt it into a movie. And this is an old story. I was going to go right back and write my next play, but that didn't happen for another 17 years.
Right. Which you finally did, the Farnsworth Invention.
Farnsworth Invention, yeah.
Amazing. I love Farnsworth Invention so much.
Thanks a lot. I like it too. And then I wrote a play after that called To Kill a Mockingbird, which I understand had already been written by somebody else, Harper Lee. But I wrote it as a play and wrote it a little different. And that play, like a lot of plays, shut down on March 11th, last March 11th, 51 weeks ago, because of COVID. But we'll be back in the fall.
Do you have a date to go back yet, certain?
We don't have a date to go back. We're, listen, it's a week by week thing, as it is with everything. New York is going to be, this isn't our topic for today, but New York is going to be the trickiest place in America to open back up because its revenue is so dependent on tourism, and the number one tourist attraction is Broadway. So how do you can't fully reopen Broadway without tourists. And tourists aren't going to come unless there's a reason to. So smart people are in a room trying to figure out how to do this. Hamilton's going to go first.
Well,
we're making Lynn go first.
Smart people in a room is your wheelhouse, I think. Are you ever going to write anything about dumb people? Would that ever occur to you? I want to see Aaron Sorkin movie about just people who inarticulate dumb people. No chance, right?
You know, I have so much admiration for people. It's not a matter of them being dumb, but people, some of my favorite playwrights are virtuosos at writing characters who have a very difficult time communicating. David Mamet can make concertos, right, out of two people who have a tough time communicating, and they kind of invent their own language. Harold Pinter very famously, was all about the pauses of what they're not saying.
Yeah, we don't do pauses.
We don't do pauses. A writer named William Goldman, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men, Princess Bride. He took me under his wing when I was in my 20s. And he told me that I am perpetually writing as if I'm on a first date, trying to make sure I get a second date. And I think what he was saying is stop trying to show up.
Well, what's interesting is I got to read a William Goldman script years and years ago. And and you guys are kind of in the same genus and species, I think, as screenwriters. But his screen descriptions could go on for pages, like a novel. And I just was always shocked. West Wing would be like, Bartlett enters the White House.
Yes,
it is lit with Christmas trees, the amber light. It reflects off the desk because there's none of it. And
there is none of it. You're right about that. And God knows you read enough West Wing scripts. As well as starring in A Few Good Men in London. But you're right. The only stage directions I'll put in is just anything necessary to understand what's going on, like he picks up a gun, that kind of thing. There's not going to be a lot of description, not because I don't believe in it, but just because I have such a poor visual sense. I just rely on other people to do that. And I can see by the look on your face, you're thinking, what the hell are you doing directing movies? It's kind of a visual medium. Not for me.
Well,
I'm still doing radio plays on the screen.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you have a philosophy as a director? Is there something, I don't know if that's really the right way to phrase it. What's the most important thing for you as a director to capture other than the embodiment of your work as a writer?
Right. What I want to do, listen, I when I'm writing, I'm kind of hyper aware that I'm not writing something that's meant to be read. I'm writing something that's meant to be performed. And so directing is kind of an extension of that. It's writing a piece of music and then conducting the orchestra. And by the way, I haven't yet, and 2 weeks from Monday, I start shooting the third movie that I'll be directing. I directed Molly's Game, Chicago 7, and then this new one coming up, but I have yet to write a screenplay knowing that I was going to be directing the movie. I didn't know that I was going to be directing Molly's Game when I wrote it, didn't know that I was going to be directing Chicago 7, the 15 years that I wrote it, and didn't know that I was going to be directing this next one when I was writing it. All I've had to do on the first two, at least, is create a place where an actor like you can give the kind of performance that you've given in the past that made me want to cast you in the first place. I got a great piece of advice from Jeff Daniels. I asked him, how much do you like to hear from the director when you're shooting a movie? How much help do you want from the director, and how much do you want the director out of your face? And he said, before we start shooting, in the weeks, days, hours before we start shooting, talk to me as much as you want about anything you want. Once the cameras start rolling, say it in 5 words or less. And it actually really made sense to me, because I want to get a scene to a place where all I have to do between takes is just say a little bit hotter, a little bit colder. You can take your time there, drive to the end of the sentence. Let's go. That's it. And you just kind of keep the energy going.
That's great advice. And I was going to ask you, as a director, when you're casting, and you always have great actors, and you're in a great place because everybody wants to say your words now. So I imagine it's a little bit of a function of calling up Cate Blanchett and saying you want to do a movie, and the answer is going to be yes. But that aside, when you're casting, is there a specific thing that you're looking for?
Yes, have they demonstrated a facility with language? And there are a couple of things an actor can't fake. An actor can't fake being smart, and an actor can't fake being funny. And I want to know, is there a mind at work there that is going to read on the screen? And do you have a sense of humor?
And the humor that bubbles under all of your work, as I think what makes it so engaging, and it's why I think one of my favorite games, and people out there, please feel free to play it, is to watch Bulworth or Moneyball and try to pick the Aaron Sorkin sequences. Spoiler alert, it's not hard to do. But and I think it's why, whether it's The American President or why West Wing continues to have the love that it has, is because you can't turn your stuff off when it comes on TV. You're like, fuck, well, I guess I'm going to be late for dinner. God damn it. And I think it's because of the humor, because we all know how it ends once we've seen it.
Well, it's a very nice thing to say. The thing is, with comedy and drama, I feel like I don't do either one well enough to do only one. So I have to kind of mix up my pitches, and that's how I'm going to get you out.
Now, and so I want to talk just really quickly, because I remember vividly being on the set of West Wing, and I feel like in all of your spare time, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, the first 2 years of West Wing, Aaron wrote 44 episodes of what are the stats? Because you were writing Sports Night.
The first year of West Wing was also overlapped with Sports Night. So I, Monday through Friday, I wrote the West Wing. Friday night through Sunday night, I wrote Sports Night. And we were doing West Wing at Warner Brothers, about 1.5 miles away is Disney, where we were doing Sports Night. And I would just commute back and forth. I remember, as would Tommy Schlamme, who was EP on both. And there was a Friday night, Saturday morning at around 3 a.m.
Hey, Friday night at 3 a.m. Hey, Friday night.
There was that was every Friday night, but on this particular Friday night, Saturday morning at 3 a.m., we were still shooting Sports Night. We were still shooting West Wing. And Tommy and I looked at each other and said, we are the worst producers in Hollywood. These are the only two sets in show business that are running right now, that we weren't able to get it done by, 6 o'clock Friday.
Well, the thing that blows my mind about it is, because it really means every West Wing episode that anybody has ever seen of that first season is a first draft.
Yeah. And that is because it's the same thing with screenplays as West Wing episodes. West Wing episodes scripts were never finished. They were just confiscated. At a particular time, someone comes in and says, pencils down. We have to do this now. You wish I've never written anything, including every single episode of all the West Wing episodes, that I didn't wish I could have the script back to work on some more. But I will say that the cast of the West Wing, I thought, bailed me out plenty of times.
Nonsense. But it is true. I mean, just for those of you guys out there, he's not making this up. He's never done. If he had his way, he would be reworking everything. I'll never forget calling you sort of out of the blue just to check up on you and just say, hey, man, you ever thought about like doing a revival of A Few Good Men? And you said, not only am I thinking about doing a revival, I am rewriting it as we speak. And
yeah.
Us doing A Few Good Men, as if that needed any revisions.
It needed plenty. And it was, you did not do the same play that was done on Broadway when you did it in London. And for that matter, the national tour that went out after it was on Broadway, I rewrote it. I rewrote it for the movie. I rewrote it for the London company. That particularly, being my first play, kind of feels like my high school yearbook picture.
Mm-hmm. That's, with all that entails. Well, it's the greatest high school yearbook picture ever. Okay, Chicago 7, because we could talk forever. You wrote it for Steven Spielberg originally, correct?
In 2006, almost 15 years ago now, on a Saturday morning, I was summoned to the home of Steven Spielberg. And just to be clear, that's not common. I don't hang out with Steven Spielberg on Saturdays watching college football. He told me he wanted to make a movie about the Chicago 7. And I said, count me in. The Chicago 7, are you kidding? This will be great. Left his house, called my father, and asked my father who the Chicago 7 were. I faked my way through the meeting. I was just saying yes to doing a movie with Spielberg the way literally anyone would.
Yeah.
Then, so there was plenty of research to do. There are about a dozen good books written about the Chicago 7, some of them by the defendants themselves. There's a 21,000-page trial transcript. But most critically, I got to spend time with Tom Hayden. Hayden passed away in 2016, but I got to spend time with Hayden, and that is what gave me it gave me the most important thing. It gave me something that I wouldn't have gotten from the books or the trial transcript. It gave me a look at the friction between Hayden and Abby that existed back then, which was very much alive in Hayden to that day. And so, and then after the research, comes the climbing the walls period. Okay, I have a lot of information. What am I writing? What story am I telling? You can line up 10 screenwriters and ask them to write about the Chicago 7, assuming they have heard of the Chicago 7. They will write 10 different movies, all of them perfectly valid. So I didn't know what movie I was writing yet, how to start, what the point was for a while. But then the film kind of organized itself into 3 stories that I was going to tell simultaneously. The courtroom drama, the evolution of the riot. How did what was supposed to be a peaceful protest devolve into such a violent clash with the police and the National Guard? And then the more personal story, the friction between Tom and Abby.
Courtroom dramas, you have a great facility for it, and it's amazing because you look how much the page count of being in the courtroom, and it feels like it just blows by, and everybody's so good at it. I knew Tom Hayden was a good friend of mine, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that, man.
Yes, he was. And I spent countless hours with him when he was married to Jane Fonda in that era. He was the first person I ever knew who had an electric car. And I was blown away with Eddie Redmayne, who doesn't really look like Tom, but I will tell you, dude, it was uncanny. I don't know what it was, but I felt Tom's spirit. I truly, truly did. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. It wasn't just the corduroy, although that was part of it.
Yeah, the corduroy was part of it. I'm really glad to hear that. Eddie was fantastic. I thought the whole cast, coming to work every morning, it was like getting tossed the keys to a Formula One race car. And I knew all I had to do was not put the car in the wall, and this cast, they were going to win. But I had told them all, I'm not looking for physical or vocal impersonations of the real people. I'm really not. In the case of Sasha and Abby, he has a kind of iconic look and an iconic, I don't even know what to call his accent, except it's an Abby Hoffman accent. It's sort of part Boston, part Brooklyn, and with his own spin in there, a little bit Lenny Bruce.
Yeah.
So except for that, you didn't need to do an impersonation of the person you're playing, and yet everyone somehow started to look and feel a little bit like the people they were playing.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt listen, they're all good. Everybody's great in it. And I don't want to feel like I'm talking about people and not, it's
no.
But he's crushes in a very difficult part. And don't you think? I think that's a very tricky part that it has in the movie. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I love Joe Levitt in this movie. I love him in every movie. He is, I won't go into it. Yes, a very difficult part. The character was important to me. I will tell you that in real life, that character, Richard Schultz, was not nearly as ambivalent as he was in the movie. He was in real life an attack dog that wanted to get the hippies. Yeah.
That's amazing. You added the layer that makes it fantastic because it's so subtle and yet so blatant at the same time. So it's kind of what you want from an actor. It was so then when he rises,
people won't remember by the time they get there, but I wanted to, you want to put them in, you want to put your characters through something. You want to put them in a spot. You want to make their lives hard. That's right. It's intention and obstacle. Yes. Also, the character's ambivalence, I thought, was a good way to let the audience into the whole thing. right? A guy who, like most people, I don't want these guys to date my sister, but I don't want them to go to jail either. I believe in what they're doing.
Right. It also gives people, to the extent that they may have one politically, like a way, like a set of eyes to come into it without him. He was not a partisan. He was.
That's right.
He had one foot in both worlds.
Yes, and so both sides had lawyers who loved the law, for whom the law was very important. One thing that listen, there was a lot that was left out. That trial lasted 5.5 months, and one of the things that I left out, which if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't leave out this time, because I think it resonates very much with today, this year, the last 5 years, and it's this. Bill Kunstler, Mark Rylance in the film.
I mean, by the way, he's never been anything other than Titan.
Yes, there was a moment, Spielberg came to visit the set. We shot in Chicago and New Jersey, and the courtroom was in New Jersey. Well, we built it there. And Spielberg came one day, and I just remember I'm directing Mark Rylance, right? I'm talking to Rylance. And I realized, and Spielberg standing behind me. And at that point, I just stopped. I said, you know what? Why don't we just get one? Why don't we? I just turned to the first AD and I said, just do that thing where you make it happen and the cameras roll.
That thing where you make it happen in the camera.
But his character, William Kunstler, as the trial went on, that man became completely undone. He became unspooled. Courtrooms were his cathedral. They were his temples. It's where justice happened. It's where equality happened. It's where the right things happened. Juries may get it wrong from time to time. They can come back with an OJ verdict. But everything that happens in that courtroom will at least have the aspiration of fairness and higher ground. And it didn't in that courtroom. Nothing that was supposed to work worked. Nothing that we cherish worked. And so Kunstler began drinking and getting high every night. He became absolutely undone. And why would I want to go back and put that in if I could? Because I think that Kunstler's reaction to it not working is very much the way a lot of us have felt over the last few years. Why doesn't this stuff work anymore? Why aren't the institutions of our democracy working the way they had been for my whole life? And so I thought it would be a good reflection of that.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, I don't know what to attribute it to, and it used to happen on West Wing all the time, is you'll take a story, you'll choose it out of the thousands of ideas that a person could have, you'll write it, and it'll be 9 months if it's a movie, or 2 months if it's an episode of television. And the time it comes on, that theme is in the national news. And once again, with the trial of the Chicago 7, it's who started the riot? What was behind the riot?
Right. I remember with the West Wing, it was starting to get spooky. And believe me, I wasn't being prescient. It was just weird luck. People would come up to me and say, would you write an episode about me winning the lottery, please? Weird things would happen. And listen, the reason Chicago 7 got made after all this time, the reason it didn't get made for such a long time, the riot sequences themselves were budget busters. A movie like Chicago 7 has got to fit into a budget that the studio feels is proportional to what the audience appetite is going to be. That's a long way of saying ain't a lot of money to make the trial of Chicago 7. Okay, it's not a Marvel movie. Not even close. We truly made it for peanuts. The entire cast got scale. We did it in about half the number of days that a more established director might get to shoot their film. But so every time a director, whether it was Steven or Paul Greengrass or Ben Stiller, every time they sat down to try a first draft and a budget, they'd get to these riots, and the whole thing would just come apart. So it kept getting put aside. Then Donald Trump ran for president. He got elected president. Both before and after he was elected, had these huge rallies. There'd be a protester, and Donald Trump started getting nostalgic about the old days when they'd carry that guy out of here on a stretcher. I'd like to punch him right in the face and let's beat the crap out of him. And it was just sounding a lot like 1968. Again, we were demonizing protest. The country was deeply divided in much the same way it had been divided in the 60s, particularly toward the end of the 60s. We thought the film, Steven said the time to make this movie is now. That was, I don't know, about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And by then I had directed for the first time Molly's Game. He said, and he was sufficiently pleased with that he thought I should direct Chicago 7. And he said, and now the riots are your problem. And I was determined. I've been being given a chance. This is the only way Chicago 7 is going to get made, is if I direct it. I would have, believed me, if Fincher had come along and said that he wanted to direct it, I would have been thrilled with that. But it was, the ball was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to let the thing fall apart over the riots. So Faden Papa Michael, the DP, Alan Baumgarten, the editor, and I sat down. We figured out a way to do the riots. Which was simply, it's an awfully long answer to your question, but we were able to shoot in Grant Park and on Michigan Avenue where the riots took place. And nothing about that area has changed, okay? And that's where we got lucky. So we were able to use a combination of three things. One, I was going to get a bunch of wide shots using the tear gas to our advantage, using all that smoke. I was going to shoot light through, have rioters kind of at the edge of the smoke, and I was going to create the illusion that there were thousands more people behind them. Then I was going to get a bunch of very, very tight shots, a pair of eyes right before a nightstick went into them, blood coming down somebody's head, a tear gas canister being loaded. And the final ingredient was archival footage, which we were only able to use because it would match what we were shooting in Grant Park. So that was the recipe for the riots.
And that archival footage is stunning because
It is.
Oh, wait a minute. Did this really happen? Archival footage. Holy fuck, it really did.
Yeah.
They're telling me that I have to wrap up with you.
I'm very sorry to hear that. But I have to thank you for something. There is a number on the bottom of my screen, probably on the bottom of yours too, giving the number of participants. Rob, there are 1,000 people watching right now. That's because of you.
It's very exciting. Again, you've crushed it. I am so excited you each thing you direct now is, it's just explosive. It's great. I'm really proud of you. You know how much
I really appreciate that, man. And I just can't wait until the two of us can work together again.
Yeah, 100%. And if this has been a great thing. And everybody watch the Chicago 7. I know that's coming up later tonight. You're going to see great writing, great directing, and Jesus Christ, those actors just fucking,
Couldn't agree more about the cast.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. I'll see you later.
Thank you so much, Rob, for leading this conversation. We have, as you mentioned, a lot of people watching, and we have a lot of questions from the audience.
Okay, if you're not choosy about the answers, I'm ready.
So, Mr. Sorkin, your words have a brilliant poetry to them. Does dialogue come first or characters? An audience member asking.
Well, thank you for the question. What comes first, the most important thing is intention and obstacle, okay? That is what drama is. Somebody wants something, something's standing in their way of getting it. They want the money, they want the girl, they want to get to Philadelphia. It doesn't matter. As long as they got to want it bad. If they can need it, that's even better. And the tactics that character uses to overcome whatever obstacle the writer puts in their way, that's going to show us who the character is. You don't tell the audience who a character is, you show them what the character wants. I need the intention and obstacle before I can write anything.
Staying on the writing, of course, there's a lot of question about the writing. Your dialogue sounds like poetry to me, and your writing has a lot of musical elements. Do you listen to music while you're writing, and how do you find the fast rhythm you have in your writing?
What a nice compliment. Thank you for that. I don't listen to music while I'm typing, but that's not really when the writing is happening. The writing is happening, first of all, let me back up a little bit. To me, dialogue is music. It's the same thing. My parents, I grew up in the East Coast. My parents started taking me to see plays when I was very young. For no particular reason. They're not in show business or anything. They were just in the theater going habit when they were young. And you know, when they were starting out in life, theater was affordable. You know, a school teacher and a young lawyer could go see plays. They took me to see plays, and sometimes I was too young to understand what was going on, but I loved it anyway because I loved the sound of dialogue. It sounded like music to me. These great actors and the words crashing into each other. It was fantastic, and I wanted to imitate that sound. So what a line of dialogue sounds like is as important to me as what it means. The actors, by the way, know that. Rob, if he were still here, could tell you, they will, after a take, go to the script supervisor and say, I dropped a syllable somewhere. It won't be, I dropped a word or I messed up a word. It'll always be, they'll talk in terms of the rhythm of it, that they can tell they added a syllable, they dropped a syllable, something was wrong in that line. So I'm listening to music a lot when I'm driving around in my car, trying to see if I can make myself feel something by listening to the music I listened to when I was in high school. If I can start an argument with myself, that's great. But music will play a big part then. By the time I sit down to type, I want to have it already. I want to write the scene in the amount of time it takes me to type it. And sometimes I get ahead of the typing. I'm very physical when I write. I am talking out loud. I'm playing all the parts. I'm saying it all out loud. I'm jumping up and down from my desk and walking around and just having fun. But like I said, what the words sound like is as important to me as what they mean.
Question. One of my favorite lines of all time is, I'm going to rip out your ice bowl and puke in your dead school, from A Few Good Men. The scene is incredibly tense. How did that scene come about?
There's no judgment here. It's just a strange line to be your favorite. And as it happens, just last night, I was participating in a fundraiser for a woman who's running for Manhattan DA. Her name is Lucy Lang, and she is the daughter of Stephen Lang, who originated the role of Colonel Jessup on Broadway. He was the first person to say that line. And as part of the fundraiser, the original Broadway cast of A Few Good Men did the final scene, including that line. And I just remember, and this was just yesterday that I heard it, and I hadn't heard it in years and years and years, really, since Rob did the play in London. And I actually remember wincing at that line. I feel I could have done better. But that was, that's about as angry and vulgar as I'm able to get publicly. So that's how that line happened.
We have a couple of questions that are around our historical event of January 6th here in the US, and asking if you would be interested in writing a script and directing a movie about the events, and also if you want to speak to the parallel with this past summer BLM protest and the January 6th insurrection in relationship to Chicago.
Sure. Well, first of all, like I was saying before, we thought the film was plenty relevant last winter when we were making it. We didn't need it to get more relevant. We didn't want it to get more relevant in the way that it did. We couldn't have, and by the way, I always, even before I was the director, I never wanted the film to be about 1968. I wanted it to be about today. But none of us could have possibly imagined how much about today it would end up being. In May, after the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, protesters took to the streets, cities all across America, and a number of those cities, like I said, they were met again, nightsticks and tear gas. And then on January 6th, not just Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, you can throw in Josh Hawley and a few others, did exactly what the Chicago 7 were on trial for doing. And that very conservative jury in Chicago would have taken all of 10 minutes to find Donald Trump guilty for the simple reason that they were conservative. They weren't demented. As for whether I would want to, I think most writers nowadays are being asked, are you going to write something about this year, these last 4 years, anything? And yes, plenty will be written about these last 4 or 5 years, plenty. My prediction is that you will seldom see Donald Trump as anything but an offstage or off-screen character. And the reason is he's implausible. You can't write him. It will end up looking and sounding exactly like Alec Baldwin on SNL because he's implausible. Also, you can write heroes and villains. You can write protagonists and antagonists and anti-heroes. But there's no such thing as an interesting character who doesn't have a conscience. Like Rob and I were talking about before, a character has to be put through something. And he never is. He doesn't care.
I know the West Wing is aspirational, but do you think we could ever actually see the White House populated by such idealistic public servants?
I sure don't see why not. And by the way, I know some idealistic public servants. The inspiration for the West Wing was the youth and idealism that I had seen, particularly in the early days of the Clinton White House. But I'm really glad you asked that question, because I like writing about heroes who don't wear capes. I like writing about heroes and not superheroes, because none of us are ever going to be able to fly or stop a bullet with our chests or leap tall buildings in a single bound. But we can lift ourselves up and we can respond to things that are aspirational, that are within sort of on the human palette of things that you can do. So I get accused all the time of having a lack of an unhealthy lack of cynicism. But I do believe that that the answer is yes to the question.
So many questions. Can you talk about the pace of lines when talking to an actor whose primary background is theater acting, and how often are you part of the conversation of pace in the editing and the directing process?
Pace is terribly important. I love working with actors who have a solid theater background. Because I know that they're going to have a facility with voice and movement that I like and that I need. I can't think of obviously with the two films that I've directed now. Sure, Alan Baumgarten has been the editor on both, but yes, absolutely, I'm in there. Saying, let's get to that faster, or let's take a breath and then get there. We're rushing it. Sometimes it's a matter of shaving off 3 frames, and suddenly a joke is there that wasn't there before, that kind of thing. So pace is very important to me.
Where and how is it that you find your inspiration, and how, and are you not scared of not living up to your past work?
I am, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I live and die with the things that I write. I really do. And it's not a matter of am I worried about living up to the past work? It's that it feels like there has been no past work, that this is all there is. I have plenty of experience with failure, and I'm sure I'll have more. And it's a tough pill to swallow. When I say failure, by the way, I'm not talking about box office failure or even critical failure. I'm talking about with The Newsroom, for instance, on HBO. I never felt comfortable in my chair writing that show. I always felt like I had a pebble in my shoe somehow. I could write a good scene here and a good scene there, but I could never put together an entire episode that worked the way I wanted it to. And that's a tough pill to swallow. When you're writing a screenplay, when you're writing a play, and you run into trouble, you drive into a snowbank, you drive into a ditch, and that is going to happen. It's guaranteed. It's going to happen. You can call the studio, you can call the producer, you can call the director, whoever is waiting for it, and say, I know I said I was going to deliver the first draft at the beginning of the summer. I've run into trouble. It'll probably be closer to the end of the summer. In television, you have hard air dates to meet, which means that you have to write even when you're not writing well. You can't back away from it because it's not working. You have to keep writing it. You have to keep writing it even when you're not writing well, and then you have to put it on a table for the cast and crew to read at a table read. You don't want to disappoint them. It's very painful. Then you got to point a camera at it and show it to the audience. So I would say that fear is a pretty good motivator.
To close, we have a question that is, dear to us as our theaters are closed. What is the first movie you would go to see in a theaters, when the theaters reopen with a full audience?
You know what? I'll go to whatever is playing at the closest theater to my house, because, and obviously there are COVID has caused much greater pain than this. But when it comes to movies, and as I mentioned to Rob, I have a play on Broadway right now. It's just been on a 1-year hiatus during COVID. It's not that I miss the big screen or movie theater sound. Chicago 7, like most of the movies we're talking about right now, like most of the movies in the awards hunt, has never played to an audience. It has played to many people individually at different times in different places. That's not the same as an audience. There is no substitute for the shared experience of being part of an audience when the lights go down, everybody laughing at the same thing and gasping at the same thing and silent at the same thing and letting the end of the piece resonate at the same time. And then walking out of the theater and people are talking about it. That shared experience, which has been around for 2,500 years now, and nothing has topped it yet. We're gonna want it back. And I'm very optimistic. I know we've all gotten used to watching movies on our iPads now by ourselves, but I'm very optimistic that once it's safe, people are gonna go to the movies again because people wanna be a part of an audience. I do.
Wonderful way to end the conversation, and thank you for being with us.
It's been my pleasure. I'm a big fan of American Cinematheque.
And we're looking forward to showing your movies at the theaters when we're ready to reopen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who came tonight. Thanks again to Rob. Have a good night.